I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Trish.
Mrs. Brew?
Here.
Mr. Kramer?
Here.
Mr. Menegini?
Here.
Mr. Oja?
Here.
Mr. Pop?
Here.
We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there any additions or changes?
No, everything's set.
If not, I need a motion on the approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion, we approve the agenda
Support.
as stated.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of May 21st, 2018, executive session of May 21st, 2018. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the regular meeting of May 21st, 2018, and the executive session of May 21st, 2018. Support.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
We'll move on to the approval of the manifest 2018-11. Scott, did you have any questions?
No, I had it answered before I got here. I'm good, I have nothing tonight. I have nothing.
Brett? Lee?
Like two questions here. First page, Public Works, almost right down to the bottom, B&B Electrical Contracting, Underground Power Install, DPW. What was the deal on that, Ray?
We had an ice issue that took out or severely bent our electrical mast. So we had B&B come in and put the service underground. Because we got the metal roof in it. Rather than just fix it, we just said, let's get it.
Is the ice issue been fixed then? We're not gonna have this next year?
No, because the mast is gone.
Oh, okay. And one other thing here, where did we go here? Page 4, wastewater. I realize there's 2 months there, the DTE bill, but $3,500? It says it's for 2 months, but still, that's $1,750 a month. I mean, it's not winter time. What are they doing down there?
No, but I'd have to look in to see that could be some process involved there, not just heating.
Well, it's still, even with some processing, I
Yeah.
hope that isn't a continuous thing that high. That's all I have.
I'll check on that for you. More detail.
Jeremy?
Nothing.
Nothing. And I have nothing. Do I have a motion on the manifest?
I'll make a motion, we approve manifest 2018-11 in the amount of $299,803.41.
Support.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
If anyone from the audience wishes to address the council on any agenda items, can do so now. If not, there'll be time for public comments at the end of the meeting. All right. We need a motion to go into public hearing.
I'll make a motion, we go into public hearing. Support.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Anderson?
All right, thank you. We're pleased to present tonight under public hearing the 2018-19 fiscal year budget. I want to start by thanking all of my staff for putting up with myself and all of the pressures and meetings we've had internally. We start this process in January, so it's not something that just happens the last month, and we go through it and go through it and go through it, and I think it's, they get quite tiresome after a while, but, it's something that because we have a lot of areas that we need to address. You know, it's a critical item each year for us. We get about a 6-month reprieve from actually forecasting, as at least they do. So I want to thank them for all their hard efforts. Also, council, we met 5 times and had budget workshops. Kind of changed over the last few years into dealing a lot more with the highlights as opposed to some of the minutia, but we had a lot of highlights to deal with this year. If you feel like we need to meet again, we could obviously do that. If you have more questions beyond the public hearing, we are scheduled to approve the budget in 2 weeks at our next meeting. So that's just something that we can decide as we go through the public hearing. But again, no question obviously is a bad question. So if you have any questions, fire them away and you know, stop me as we're going. As an overview, the budget. The City of Norway has 13 funds. We've included the 13th here the last few years. It's the OPEB fund, which it's pretty small, but it did accomplish the 13th. We did drop the golf fund. We rolled that into the public work or the general fund when we came up with the lease agreement with the golf club. So we kind of swapped one for another. Another change over the last couple of years is the fire fund is not in the general fund as it used to be a few years ago, but the revenue for the fire does come from the general fund. So that particular fund has, we have a contract with Norway Township and Waseca Township. The revenues are based off of a formula, a contract. It's a 5-year rolling average with the budget number applied, and so that's basically where that amount comes from. On the overall fund side, we have $14 million of revenue, $14,101,897 of revenue, as opposed to $13,868,828 of expense. The electric fund is the largest fund at 42%, followed by the general fund at 20%. Our communications fund is third at 12.5%. All other funds are below 10%. That's based on size of revenue and expense. They track both equally, whether it's revenue or expense on the percent side. Again, as I'm going through this, if you have any questions at the time, please stop me and be more than happy to answer those questions. I did provide a manager's budget message. In that message, I'm just going to walk through that message because I think that message hits the highlights of the whole budget process. We talk about you know, some of our personnel expense, which goes across all the funds with our health insurance and our group life. On the health insurance side, I want to make a note that for a number of years now, we've been hard capped, which means that we have set our increase each year by the cost of living. The employees then, we no longer are going to the employees, asking them if we can make a change here and there to lower costs. The employees have their own committee, and they get together. Here's the hard cap number, and then they decide on the type of insurance that they would take and what they're willing to spend, because anything above that is in their under their charge. So the typical percentage the employees are paying is about 27%. However, this past year we did have an opportunity to work with the IBW. They have a group fund which I've actually been preaching for since I've been here. You know, try and have the individual bargaining units go across like ASME or IBW or police and use their whole membership. And the IBW made some changes the last couple of years, and so we entertained, or the employees entertained, looking at their insurance. So that did save them some money. It doesn't reflect us because like I said, we're in a hard cap. So we have limited our exposure on the increases.
What are the projected increases for this year? Do we have any?
I believe it was, what, 2%?
I have not seen anything yet on, are you talking on IBW?
No, on the hard cap,
Oh, the hard cap increased by 2%.
2%.
Okay, what about the insurance? Have we heard anything from them?
I've not seen any, IBW would be a June 1st increase, so I'm gonna guess that I haven't heard anything from them, so I'm thinking there's no increase there. Then the other employees that are on Blue Cross Blue Shield or the Blue Care Network, that increases on January 1st.
Oh, okay.
So,
So it ain't July 1?
One note, I did talk about our retirement system in MERS. We're working through with the state on, with our underfunded position. One of the things I note again is that area that I've been harping on for a decade is the investment income that we receive as the employees put in and the city puts in. We have a year-end asset balance in 2017 of $9,112,000. Our rate of return from MERS is 5.78%. Again, that's problematic because when they use their actuarial number, they use 7.75% as an investment. So we're harping on them that, you know, they're performing under the numbers that they're using in their evaluations. You know, and actually I've been tracking this since 2004. The highest year that they've had was in 2007, which was 7.93%. And they were using an 8% figure at that point. The average over all of those years is, what did I say it was, 5.36%. So, you know, those are problematic numbers. They may argue with how I calculate those, but I work with our auditor, Mary, and I look at it, and it's like, then you explain exactly how that works out, because we're not seeing that in our investment income. So that's something that we're still trying to, like I said, I still try to constantly work with them on, but you know, it's a big machine, and I'm a little voice, I
Are
guess, at
we
that point.
gaining any ground?
This past year, we did lose ground a little bit again, and
And we put in more, right?
yeah, we did put in more.
And the employees put in more.
Yeah. The employees are putting in 8% right now. When I look across the other municipalities, 8% is a pretty high number, and Treasury recognizes that. Now, this week, I'm going to be up in Marquette, or up in Houghton. Treasury's going to have a day up there with some training. I'm going to go up there. I'm going to meet with a couple of the folks that deal with this, and you know, we'll get their take on, you know, the governor's panel and what we're doing. But I think from Treasury side, they're sympathetic with what our arguments are. So I think from a long-term standpoint, we have a plan. We have a decent plan that they recognize. So we'll be able to move forward. But, you know, like I said, it's a long-term plan. It's not something that we just come out of, you know, within a couple of years.
Right, and that's a count of them not hitting the 8% for how many years too, doesn't help.
Doesn't help. It has hurt us.
That's not the city's fault that
Right.
they haven't made their end of the bargain.
Well, you know, you're saying we put in extra money. We've been told for the last couple of years, don't put extra money in, because if you put it in another investment, you get a better than 5.78% return, which we have other investments that get better than 5.78%. We're better off to do it that way than to give it to them and go backwards. I mean, if we bonded out and became 100% funded, the next year we would be underfunded based on their performance. So I think that's a structural issue that the legislature has just not been willing to recognize, and we're trying to get them to recognize it. But MERS is a very strong lobby in Lansing. They're there. We're not. And so, like I said, I've been working on them since 2004, since 2003, on different rules that they have and different issues, and it's been a long struggle with them. So, but we need to move forward. Like I said, it's a long-term situation that we're we have a plan we're working out of, so we'll just keep moving forward. As far as on the general fund, does anybody have anything on the all funds? On the general fund, our transfers, which is, in fact, we're going to be reclassifying that from transfers to, what was recommended?
Administrative expenses.
Administrative expenses. What that is those are funds that the enterprise funds, the utilities, contribute to the general fund for activities. Now, when I go through in each utility, we call it enterprise fund, if they were standalone, they would have accounting, payroll, billing, they would have a number of activities that our general fund handles. And so what they do is they pay into the general fund for those activities. We have a formula that we've worked out for decades with our auditor where we use a proportional amount of revenues. We've also looked at it from an expense side, but when you look at the percentages, it doesn't really matter. It comes out pretty much the same amount. And we apply that towards, we have a list. When you go in the budget, you'll see a transfer tab in the budget. It shows the list of activities, expenses that we apply that percentage to, and that comes up with the transfer revenue into the general fund. The next highest, that's at 38%. The next highest is property taxes at 29%, state shared revenue at 10.5%, and then all other revenues are below 10%. A note on, our property taxes did go up slightly this year. The assessments went up slightly this year. The taxes stays the same. Let's just say that. The tax stays the same. But the assessment, the appraisal has gone up, or our assessed values have gone up a little bit this year, and that comes out of the Dickinson County Equalization Department. On the state share revenue, we did go up a little bit this year in percentage. Last year, we were down about 8.5% of revenue in the general fund. It's up to 10.5%. I think that's a positive trend coming out of Lansing. But if you look at that portion of the explanation in the report, we still haven't received or gotten back to the the highest value we had was in 2003 and 2000. Well, actually 2001 and 2 was $373,000. We haven't gotten back to that level. And at that point, the revenue sharing was about 28% of our general fund revenues.
Do you think, and maybe you and Mary, is it up a little bit because it is election coming up? Do you guys see that on election years, that sometimes what you take in is a little higher, or no? I
don't think so. That's my opinion. I don't think so. I think it tracks more with the revenues, the state revenues, and we have a pretty good lobby power with the Michigan Municipal League. We've been working statewide on this issue for many years, and I think our legislators do understand that if you don't meet your obligations, you read through the explanation of where revenue sharing comes from. There's a statutory and a constitutional component of it, and they've basically almost eliminated the statutory component. They can't touch the constitutional, but they've almost cut it in half. And they've been bringing that back a little bit, and I think they recognize that it's hurting communities, especially, we're one of many communities across the state of Michigan that are having issues, like I mentioned earlier, about with our pension. And if we don't have those revenues that the state had obligated at one time, they've cut those back. We're gonna have issues, and they're seeing it across the state. We put out budgets year after year that are balanced, that we're able to still do some things, for our facilities, our equipment, our roads. Some communities are really struggling more than we are, with that cash flow. And it comes down to this revenue sharing number. So I am encouraged by seeing it go up. We constantly get told that when they put the budget out in Lansing, that they're going to provide more revenue sharing. But it's kind of taking a pay cut and then saying, oh, we'll give you a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here to get you back to where you were. Well, like I said, we haven't been back to 2000, we haven't been back to that level.
I see here, Ray, that it's '05, we're still 6-7% under what we're getting in '05, and that was 14 years ago.
Right. So that, that's just been one of our struggles, but, we just have to work our way through it locally. That's something I think I was able to do, is to deal with this stuff locally, and of course, we try to stay engaged, with the folks in Lansing, and with our lobby group, our associations. I think like I said, I think they do a great job on our behalf, but it's a big ship that doesn't move one way or the other very easily. So, refuse collection, that's going to stay the same this year. We have $13 is going to stay the same. Our $71 per ton that we get charged by the authority, they've moved to keep that the same this year. So I think that's a positive for the fund. We're also putting aside $25,000 a year out of this fund out of this account to buy a new garbage truck, which you typically buy every 5 to 7 years. So we're on a 7-year schedule, which we're a couple years away still. So does anybody have any questions on general fund revenues? So on general fund expenditures, we just have a couple of items, major items out of the general fund this year. One is, of course, the squad car. We have $40,000 programmed in the budget for the squad, but keep in mind that we get a 55% grant from RD, so that's $22,000 of revenue through the grant. We also have roughly $40,000 of budget for some work at City Hall, everything from the phone system to working. We have to replace some insulation and do some work and maintenance type work in the City Hall. So we want to stay on top of that. Mary, do you have anything else that you can think of out of general fund expense that I missed?
No, I think that's the main
I think that those are the main things. We don't add a whole lot in our general fund. The DPW, they typically, like we're talking about a salt shed or a salt building of some sort or a storage building, we know we have to take down that little building, but that actually qualifies under major and local, so we've got that in major and local. We're still looking at what we want to do, but we did put $150,000 in major and local to try and account for that.
So will we do that this year?
Yeah, that's something we have to address this year. That building is,
Bad shape.
yeah, it's bad shape, so we have to take that out and do something different. We do have, and I'll move right into major and local, we do have maintenance activities, painting, line painting, patching. We do not have roads this year, and that is, all the work we did last year, we just didn't have the monies out of the major and local to try and address. We do have our small urban and our rural task force projects coming up here within the next 1 to 2 years, and that's got an 80% grant component to it for the construction. So we're going to set ourselves up to make sure that we're prepared for that work. But this year when we talked about it as we went through budget hearing, it's like where's this money coming from? Typically it has come from another fund, and it's just something that this year with that particular fund, we need to address some other issues, and I guess your decision was to let's move forward, and we'll take a year, and then next year we'll hit it.
Plus also last year we had the expense of the cross streets.
Yeah,
But that wasn't covered by the project.
No, we did quite a bit of work last year. Because of our major water and sewer project, we did quite a bit of non-eligible funding out of major and local. to cover those cross streets, because we're there, we might as well do it, we should do it. I think that was the right decision, and so this year we're gonna just do maintenance, and hopefully next year we'll be able to start back up again with some of the crescent shape jobs that we normally have done in the past. Downtown development, again, they've got their standard budget. It's nothing really too major out of their budget. They have a bond issue from Streetscape that comes due in 2024, and I think that does limit them to some extent up until that point. But they do have some projects that they're looking at. One is, of course, the couple of parks that we have down on Main Street. We're gonna fix those up, clean those up. They're also working, up along the highway. We're always looking for opportunities, economic development in the industrial park, so we try to keep $100,000 available so we can get into a project over there if we need to help a business. So it's going to be pretty low key, for them. Looking at other type of economic development type initiatives, but not really budget related, more time.
11% goes into the DDA, right?
11%.
11%. Now, is that state mandated? Is that close to what everybody puts in the DDA?
No,
That has the DDA?
What happened is in 1994, they capped they have an area, a DDA district, and they capped the property value at that level from 1994. Any increase after that goes into the DDA district. And then they also capture the county tax. So that's the true value of the DDA and the TIFA is capturing that extra monies to be spent in the district.
Right, well, you said that happened in 1994. Was that something the state did, that you had to do that, or was that just something the city did it themselves?
No, we did that based on state statute. They have the TIFA district statutes, and so they put together a committee, and they looked at something that would help make improvements in town, in the city, and that they came up with the DDA district.
Do most districts have that then?
It depends on how they set it up. I'd say there's quite a few that have it that way, have a TIFA. Others have a taxing district if they're not set up the same way.
So is it 11% for whoever sets that up, no matter what town you're in? Or is that just?
No, it's how you set it up.
It's how you set it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you follow that particular statute. Okay, on the communications fund, or the old cable fund, we switched the name from cable to communications because we feel that better reflects the type of operations that we now have. In the old days, we just had cable TV. Over a decade plus, we've moved that particular operation into, of course, internet and phone. So it's a full communications package. The one area that, and again, from an expense standpoint, there's nothing major out of this fund, but we did look at it, paraphrasing from our budget hearings, we looked at it, and one of the main areas of issues that we've had to address in this fund is the annual 8+% increases that we get in our subscriber fees. That's on the video side, on the cable side. And I was, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, you can relate it to, say, the refuse collection, where we made a conscious effort to say that at $13 a month in garbage collection, it covers the expense plus putting $25,000 away a year, for the garbage truck. We're not going to rely on the rest of the general fund to subsidize. Now, you could cut it in half and say, okay, but then our taxes and the rest of the general fund will subsidize that. We chose not to do that. It's a fee-based system. Cable, when you look at our communications, when we looked at it, you got the internet, you have the phone, and you have the TV. And if your TV fees are not covering the subscriber fees, which is what we get charged to have each one of those channels, then the rest of the fund is subsidizing the television. So that was something we went through in some detail, and it was the confirmation from the council that we needed to step up and bring up those cable fees, to at least cover those subscriber fees. This year, we're going to be increasing cable from $18 to $24 a month for basic, and $52 to, what was it, 71? Oh, 52 to 62. It was $10 on the extended basic side. And when we look at what cable television is charged around us, and I'm not talking the dish, and I'm not talking some alternative types of video, I'm talking purely cable, we are still below, those other offerings. So it's not 100% there, but it's a step to cover those subscriber fees.
A step in the right direction. And I just, want the community to know, when we went through this fund, the TV itself is not holding its own. And that's, nobody wants to raise prices, but also we had to borrow out of another fund because this fund was below and didn't make enough money. And as of right now, we're losing money on every TV customer. So it's unfortunate we have to do that, but that's where the council has to go. And we're getting a step closer, even at the raise that we're putting it at. We still aren't going to be making any money, right?
Right, off just the TV side?
TV,
Yeah. So, just to point out, though, that the internet and the phone rates are not changing, just the TV side. Any questions on that?
And the triple play is going to go up accordingly, or is the triple play staying the same?
No, the triple play goes up accordingly, and you get your deduct, your same
That's what
deduct.
just
Yeah.
making sure that people knew that too.
Yeah, yep, that is true, Jeremy. Okay, on the electric fund, this is like I said early on, this is the largest fund that we have, largest operation. It is the most complex operation in the sense that with our hydro and with our distribution, we have to work in both areas. This year, we're positioning ourselves for some additional work down at the hydro. If you followed us along this last year, we do have a large runner project again on our units 1 and 2. We've had very good success so far in working with the contractor, engineer, the design and manufacturing. They're actually ahead of schedule, and we had the design all checked out by a third party, which gives us even more confidence. And I think that we're looking forward to actually having that project start earlier than we originally planned. I'm still waiting on a schedule from them. They had promised me a schedule a week or so ago. I'm still waiting on that. I should get that this week, and we're looking at trying to get them in a little bit earlier. They would like the Unit 1 side, the Westinghouse side, done by Christmas. So I think it's a real positive outlook. That is a $3 million project, and we did a bond issue to cover that expense. We also worked through our rate coverage for that, and that did not have an effect because there was an insurance receipt on that as well. Plus, we already had some monies budgeted in the fund to cover some work, so that didn't affect the rates for having that bond issue. We utilized that money that we had budgeted plus the insurance. We have some additional work down at the hydro that we still need to work on with our concrete restoration. I did move some monies around since our budget hearing. I noticed that we had inflated some estimates on some work that FDS was doing for us. I also saw some additional budget monies that I don't believe, I talked with Tim and Mary, and I think we had, again, pretty aggressive numbers. What we needed to do was, there's our concrete work over on the spillway is, it's a 2-year project. And if we do the $80,000 a year, it would take the 2 years to handle it. And I met with TCR, and we'd save about $10,000 to $15,000 of mold costs if we could do it in 1 year. So I went back into the budget to see if we could come up with that additional $80,000, and that's what I was I saw the extra amounts. And so we're going to bring that to you probably at the next meeting. We can further discuss that, but I moved that monies around in the budget so that it could cover it. If we decide to move the other direction, I mean, we could always do that. So at least we went laterally, we didn't add any, to try and get this extra work.
That's what I was just gonna ask you, when are we gonna get them numbers to look at?
Yeah, they're in there. Like I said, we had like $50,000 for FDS, and after going through with Jesse, I mean, he's going to use a fraction of that. He's going to use about $10,000 to $15,000, and then we had $100,000 in for Unit 1 and Unit 2 repairs. Well, that's covered under the project. So I think it might have been a carryover from a previous, before we actually signed up Leaderstrom.
Have we used FDS now for the whole last year?
Yeah.
Mary, can you get me the numbers on what we spent on the dam last year on that? All right.
So that's going to pretty much be the lion's share of the dam work this coming up year. I think that that it's going to be very busy, and it's going to be concentrated in mainly those two areas. On the system side, on the distribution side, we are going to continue trying to finish off WPA Road. One of the things I show you in this report is basically a listing of priorities. So once we're done with WPA Road, we're going to try and switch over and start working on Norway Hill. Those costs that we have in there is a material cost, and what we're doing is we're stretching those out over a 2-3 year period, depending on what we can do with our crew. So we got Norway Hill, Perning Lane, we got Vulcan we have to hit. We got a number of areas that we have to address over the next 5 years plus. As far as the budget itself, we did program in a 1.5% increase. That was something that towards the tail end of our budget hearing, the council decided that they thought it was appropriate this year. It kind of matches our wholesale power increase. But keep in mind though, when we advertise a 13-cent plus rate, does not include that power cost adjustment clause, which is actually takes the rate down a penny. Well, historically, it's been, how many years now, Mary? It's been a penny.
Probably 3.
Yeah.
Since we've had anything different than that.
So your actual rate that you're charged is actually less than the 13 cents. It's kind of different than, say, the investor owns that. They give you a rate, and then there's a fuel adjustment charge and some other charges that make the rate go up higher. Ours actually, our adjustment clause makes it go lower. So we've historically lowered that rate through, and that's just the amount of water that we have, generation above 1 megawatt. That 13 cents is based on 1 megawatt, that's a pretty much dry year. We average way more than that. So any questions on the electric? So the last couple funds would be our water and sewer fund. Big project this last year. There's not a whole lot of work that we're going to be looking at in both of those funds. The rates stay the same. We're going to take a breath. We're going to do maintenance. We are going to have bring forward a request for a water asset management study. We need to do that. It's like we're doing with the sewer with the SAW grant. The state does not have grant programs for the asset management on the water side, but that we are mandated by the DEQ, to start that process. So we're going to bring that. I've already got that out for RFQ, and we're going to ask that we're going to bring that to you guys for consideration.
Is that going to be budgeted into?
That's budgeted already into our budget. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a multi-year project. It's a couple of years to go through that whole thing. That'll tell you more where we're going with the fund and with the system.
Do you have any idea what the cost on that's going to be, Ray?
I don't have it off the top of my head, Lee. I do have it in a couple years.
This frosts me, the state mandate stuff, and damn it, if you're gonna mandate it, you should have to pay for it.
Yeah. Unfunded mandates is something we've been harping on for how many years?
Pardon my language.
We are gonna have, we're gonna do some maintenance on the water side. We're gonna inspect those tanks, high pressure and low pressure tanks. That'll be coming, but that's about $3,300 a piece. The asset management plan is about $40,000 total, about $20,000 a year.
20 grand.
Yeah, that's what I have budgeted. I'm hoping I'm a good budgeter on that. The only other area that we've talked about was equipment in the water fund. We've talked about the backhoe, having to replace that backhoe, and we're not, did you get anything back from, talking about the financing on that, the option?
No, I mean, from the bank, we've got those numbers.
Okay.
If we go through, we just found out today, if we go through rural development, probably be similar financing rate-wise as the bank had quoted us, but we're eligible for $50,000 of grant money on that backhoe. We would not be eligible till the start of their fiscal year, which is October 1st, but it's probably worth waiting till October 1st for a $50,000 grant. And then they will do the loan on the balance and finance the balance.
Right.
We just found out today that we're eligible for that, so we'd also be eligible the following year for another $50,000 if we decided to move forward with the front end loader. I know that Rick has talked about that, so definitely something to look into. So we're gonna probably pursue get the paperwork started on the backhoe for the October 1st.
Yeah, we're eligible for 55% grant, but the maximum that they give out to any one community in any 1 year is $50,000. So with the cost of, we're going to be under that, we're over that 55%, so.
Do we have the old one back yet?
Yes, I think we,
Yes.
yeah, we got it back.
We probably should wait on that, if we can get the $50,000 grant.
I would think so. And then it's basically the same process we use with the police car.
Right, and what we might want to do is get the paperwork into rural development, get that process started. Because usually what happens is once they obligate those funds to you, which could be as early as like October 1st, once they obligate those funds, then you can go out and bid. So we can have everything ready to go. With the hopes of just waiting till we're obligated, which, it isn't necessarily always October 1st, but it could be shortly thereafter, and then we could go to bid. And I know Rick has been working on putting together the bid documents for that.
So that completes my narrative of my message and the budget. Open for questions specifically, generally.
I know when, in the budget discussions, we had a lot of talk of some personnel movements and adjustments. Have those employees been included in this, discussed? Have they bought into what we want to do?
Well, we've made one move, and that's been working so far. That was between electric and cable. And yeah, I think that it's been working out so far. I told them just, between the foreman, make sure that we stay in touch, because, we're looking at possibly having to add a guy in electric, and with the issues with the cable, we said, let's try this.
Right.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that the employees were included in the discussion, that they're bought into what we want to do.
Yeah, we sat them down before we made the move, and we had a discussion. There's some reservations, like any change, but, all we're asking is to try it and give it your best. And, we don't want to put anybody in any situation that's not safe. Get trained, get qualified, but it's something that I think, as professionals, I think we owe it to the community to try and work this out.
Right, and that's a help also to the communication fund.
Absolutely.
Having that person half-time in the electric, so that's another way we're trying to save money in the communication fund. Is there any other questions? No? If not, we need a motion to go back into open session, or go to public hearing.
I'll make a motion, we exit public hearing, go back into regular session.
Support.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Mr. Ocha?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on to communications. Resolution 2018-10. Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, we have 4 resolutions that we pass in the process, in our budget process. The first 2, in the past, we've had all 4 come to you at the night that you pass the budget. The problem is that the 2 that we're going to talk about tonight are the non-union wage and rate scale, and also the utility and operating fee structure and scale. That's Resolution 2018-10 and Resolution 2018-11. We'd like to bring this forward now because if there were any changes that were to be made, if there was any disagreement on one of these items, we have to go back into the budget and make some changes, and it's pretty tough the night you're trying to pass the budget, to do that. So we have both of those resolutions for you. There is one thing that we've been working on for a couple months now, and that's in a demand area for electric. This actually, in more times than not, it helps some of our customers that are on the demand, but it clarifies how our demand rate is applied. There's an explanation when you look at commercial CL demand and industrial. It says for each month, the customer shall be billed the lesser of 1, the amount of the energy, or 2, the amount of energy charge plus amount of charge, demand charge. This is really complicated. We spent, how many times did we get together to say, okay, explain this again? What happens is if you have a really low load factor, which, what they do is they take a business that has a peak, and then their energy over the course of the month is relatively low in relation to the peak. They take the average of the peak and that low energy usage applied over that whole month, and that is what they call their load factor. So a very high load factor means that they have the peak, but they maintain a very high energy usage over that period of time. A low load factor, they peak, but then they drop down to a low load factor. So what we do is there's called this energy limiter, and it's applied to those low load factor customers where they actually, it does benefit them, because we've got some customers that paying that demand charge is really, it's, even though they have a lower kilowatt charge, that demand charge really is an oppressive charge for them. And so this kind of offsets that. If they have that low load factor, that it offsets it a little bit. The feed mill is a good example. I'll just mention them, where this is something that, and actually this is one of the reasons we really looked into this, is because they have that situation, and without having it identified in the resolution, we're really putting them in a crunch. So a couple other customers though that will benefit from this. We went through all of our customers to see who it affected, how it affected, and for majority of people this has no bearing, but for a couple of our commercial customers this is pretty big incentive. Mary, I don't know, you went through all of this. And
Well, the 6 month, they have to hit that demand also for 6 out of 12 months.
right.
Because you've got some seasonal customers that they might hit it 3 months out of the year, and then because they're on demand, they're basically getting charged those other 9 months at that higher rate. So it just makes sense to, to come up with something so you're not punishing those seasonal customers.
Right.
One of the things the first things that I've asked, and we had WPPI really, Jeff Forbes really helped us out a lot with this, but one of the requirements that I had was we should do what the industry does. You know, we haven't changed this in decades and decades, and where it comes from, the 40 kW, I wanted to say, hey, what do our other BPI members do? You know, what's the industry standard? You know, how does this work? And so WPPI came in and they said, well, this is something that they've been going to quite a bit. And it's not new language, it's something that's out there. So that's something we took quite a bit of time looking at. We didn't understand it very well, that's why in the budget hearing we didn't present it, because we were working through getting more detail. So we can understand if you had some reservations on it, but I would recommend, you know, let's moving forward with it, and at least for this year, we evaluate it. But I think that, you know, from a utility standpoint, we don't go backwards on our revenues, and I think that for some individual customers, it's going to be beneficial. And it's a lot of clarity. So, but outside of that, when we get back, again, we mentioned the 1.5% on the electric utility rate. We mentioned the $6 and $10 on the cable. The other utility fees stay the same. On the administration fee, we are requesting consideration to increase the variation from $150 to $300. And the reason for that is that we cannot use the Norway Current anymore, and the cost of publications is over the $150. So, you know, we need to cover our costs for publishing and doing the work just to have the public hearings and have the variation. That's why we're requesting that amount.
And do we have to put that in 2 different newspapers?
No, just one.
Just one?
Ray, backing up to that 1.5% in the electric, on the average bill, how much is that? Do you know, Mary?
It came to 0.2 of a penny on the residential rate.
0.2 of a penny times 500 kilowatts, 750 kilowatts.
Yeah, it's not very
$5,
much. It's, yeah,
$4, $3,
couple
something
bucks.
like that, yeah. That's off my head, so.
Yeah.
On the other one that we want to talk about is, at the last meeting, we had quite a discussion about the fine for not getting a permit. Our traditional was 3 times a permit fee. We went to a flat $500, and then we talked about some administrative rules for mitigating the issue. And Grant and I spent the better part of a week and a half to 2 weeks here going through our zoning code and going through, you know, some of the issue we might have in having that kind of a structure. We have in the zoning code a process for a fine or for a ticket. We issue a ticket, and then that person would have to go to court for that, and it's a civil infraction. Each day of violation could have another ticket, but that's already been established in the zoning code. And calling up the magistrate on a first offense on a ticket like that, a civil infraction, the total is about $100. It's like $85 and then $15 of court fees. We get 3%, so we get $3. But that's how the infraction, unless we set up our own court, that's how the monies go. In talking with Grant, I mean, looking at it, we want compliance. We're not really looking at the money side of it. We want compliance. And I know we wanted to have an incentive that, you know, somebody doesn't just say, well, I'll just pay the 3 times. And that's what we were feeling was happening. But I think with the ticket, that adds that incentive. Also, by keeping the 3 times the permit fee, we're not really adding a fine. What it is it's instead of $20, it's $60. So we do get some of that back. If we keep that, I think that's still an appropriate amount. Now, we can obviously keep it, what we had before. I'm going to kind of throw the ball over into Grant's court because, you know, a lot of it was a legal discussion as to what we felt like, how we wanted to handle it from the process.
Thanks, Ray, and just following up on that, I mean, I know the council had some frustrations, I think it was the last meeting anyway, and regarding some of the past non-compliance, or real or perceived, and I think we had actually some people come in and pay for their zoning compliance permit after the last city council meeting. I think the council was their intention to send a message that, you know, the council and the city try to work with the community, but also doesn't want to see non-compliance or people thumbing their nose at the regulations. In regards to the zoning permit fees, you know, when Ray and I looked it over, it looked as though there was already something in place in order to proceed and to hopefully deter some of those actions in the form of ticketing, which we haven't done in the past. I think we went through this a couple of years ago. You guys updated your zoning code, and within the code was a process that includes ticketing and also the 3 times the fee. So it does accomplish much of what I think council's intentions were, and that process was in place, and we did sit down and work through the mechanism by which we would anticipate both the city manager, who's the zoning compliance officer, with Officer Borga, who also is out in the streets and out in the community issuing citations or bringing those issues to the attention of council, or city manager Anderson rather, and put in place the process for ticketing and working through those issues. Hopefully we don't need to address that at all, frankly, with the community, but that is in place, and that is at the disposal of the city manager, who is again acting as the supervisor, and with Officer Borga as well.
Why didn't we ticket before, if we could do that?
I think it was just, it wasn't historically, you know, how we handled zoning. We do that in property maintenance. We don't ticket on the first offense, but if we have chronic offenders, we ticket, and it's the same process, civil fine, whatever. On zoning, we just had 3 times the permit fee, and I think one of the things we did was we kind of followed the way the building code, you know, they don't do tickets, they do fines off of their permit fees. And I think it's just something we hadn't done in the past, and so, you know, in this kind of issue, I think we looked at it and said, hey, we got this, you know, it's a process we can use.
And the other thing I think that's important from my perspective as well, it also gives folks due process. If a ticket is issued, they have an opportunity to, of course, fight the ticket if they wish, and at that point I would appear on behalf of the city with Officer Borga or one of the police officers, whoever issues the ticket, to address it and bring it forth, so they do have a due process procedure, and I think that's always important as well going through this.
Does it have to be 3 times? Can we do 5 times? Can we change that?
The permit fee?
Yeah.
The permit fee.
I mean, if the fine, if you want to make it 5, that's up to you. That's totally up to you.
Well, and the way it works is, so on a first offense, if Ray puts up a fence without getting a permit, using the example that was utilized last time, Ray would be issued a ticket. First offense would be $100, is the way the courts have it put in place. Each additional day while it's outstanding, you could be issued an additional ticket. So it starts going up from there. So a second offense, I believe, jumps up to, was it 250?
150.
150. And then incrementally from there, they generally haven't seen a whole lot of situations in which it continues to increase as well. I think Iron Mountain has the same.
So there's no tearing it down until you get the permit?
That's still part of what's in place by the council's resolution.
Yeah, that's still part of your resolution. I mean, I have to defer to Grant on that. I mean, when you have, you know, if somebody does something the correct way other than getting the permit, you know, they get the permit, I prove it, you move forward. If it needs a variation, what's happened in other communities, this is the way it happens, is that if it's not done correctly, they would have to go through a variation process or take it down. And they go through the variation process, and there are communities that have said, okay, we're not going to grant the variation, take it down. So it's our own kind of jurisdiction or a judicial process. But if they've done it all correctly per the code, it's just they didn't get the permit. No, typically you don't see a tear down. Now, in what you approved last meeting, we would make them tear it down before they were eligible to get a ticket. I don't know how that would stand up in court, and that's, I gotta throw that back over to Grant. So what's your recommendation for that part of what they passed last meeting?
I haven't researched that extensively, but again, because they wouldn't be in compliance in the first place, I think their position would be tenuous at best. I think it's more of a council issue on how much of a hard stance you want to take on this. You know, for instance, again, using Ray and picking on him a little bit, if Ray puts up a fence and doesn't get a permit, most of these permits, if everything is in compliance and everything is appropriate, it's basically a rubber stamp. It's hey, making sure that everything's in place, making sure it's the lines for the property lines are not affected, and if everything is in compliance, it's a rubber stamp, and you pay your $20 and away you go.
Well, not if they would pay whatever you decide, if it's 3 times or 5 times. That's where the fine comes in.
Right, and so if everything else is in compliance and they just didn't get the $20 permit, they would have to pay the $60, but it would comply with all our zoning requirements. So that's where you get into the council's position of, if Ray puts up a fence and the only thing he didn't do was get the permit, and it's in compliance with every other zoning requirement, the setbacks, in compliance with the height regulations, in compliance with everything else, and again, we're using the fence as the example, to then have the person tear it down and then come back the next day and pay the $20 for the permit. Again, it's up to council how you wish to proceed. I think it's harsh, but I believe it's probably also enforceable. I haven't dug deeply into that, but I think it's largely council's determination of how hard you want to be on things. And I think that also going beyond that, and I don't know how far the council wants to get into discussions on all of this at this point, but the fence is the one we keep talking about, but it can extend to concrete work, it can extend to other scenarios in which zoning compliance permits would be required beyond just fences. And that's where I think where these unintended consequences of the tear down requirement it's a harsh penalty, but again, the person doesn't get the permit, they're not in good legal standing in the first place. So that's where, again, it comes back to the council's determination of how you want to proceed. The city manager, working again as the zoning compliance officer, it certainly is a deterrent, and it's certainly a message that the city wishes to be tough on zoning compliance, and the citizens should educate themselves regarding the zoning compliance permits before they start constructing anything on their property.
Mr. Carlson, could it be, how can I say that, on a case-by-case basis? Like the cement had been mentioned, and we could say, oh, okay, you got to do this, you're going to find you don't have to tear it down, but something like a fence or a building, we could say, hey, this is above and beyond. Could it be taken without setting precedent? Could you do that on a case-by-case basis?
I certainly wouldn't recommend it, Councilperson Menegini, because then you start getting into either you have the rule, you take it down, or you don't. Because if you start getting into a case-by-case basis, who's the determiner of when it should come down and when it shouldn't come down?
The 5 of us.
Well, but I think that goes beyond the scope of City Council's obligations.
Oh, okay. Just asking.
And plus with time requirements, time commitments, and there's a process, and that's one of the things that Ray and I chatted a little bit about as well. If, again, we keep going back to this fence, and Mr. Anderson's fence, because we'll keep using him.
Yeah.
If City Manager Anderson put up a fence and it wasn't in compliance with zoning, maybe the height requirements, or this, whether or not it was on a highway and you couldn't see through it, and you asked for a variance, and you didn't get the permit first, and you asked to come before the Board of Appeals, the Zoning Board of Appeals. If the Zoning Board of Appeals does not grant the variance, the fence needs to come down, and that would be removed at that point. So there is a process in which something that was in non-compliance would be ordered to come down, but it would be going through the process to get to that point. But I wouldn't like, and I wouldn't recommend to the council to have it on a case-by-case basis. I think it opens up a slippery slope and puts the council in a tough position. Even if it were to come before the council for that decision, I think it puts the council in a tough position and opens the council up and the city to arguments of selective prosecution or selective enforcement. When is it okay? When is it not okay? I think it's either you do or you don't. But I wouldn't like a selective situation.
So we already have something in place for it, you know, with the ticket. We just have never really enforced the ticket.
We haven't written a ticket. And we don't have that many cases, I'll tell you, we do not have that many cases.
So I mean, for kind of something to reinforce them to get a permit, if we were just stood a little bit stronger on the ticket process, that would.
Here's something that, you know, and we go back through, like, especially Grant and I, we go back through and we do what-ifs, we talk a lot about different scenarios to try and come up with what we might be the best process. And, you know, one of the things psychologically is if you raise the fee to $100, let's just say you have a permit fee, standard permit fee, it's $100. You know, when it goes above the $20, this is what I see. People don't like to pay that. That is just, oh, I can't believe it. Permit fee is $100. If you get a $50 or $100 ticket, well, how do I put this? They don't, you know, if you fine them $50, let me go that way. If you fine them $50 or $100, oh, I'll pay it, and they move on. It's like, psychologically, they're in a different place. The permit fee is $100, it's too much. But a fine of $100, well, I'll pay it, move on. But yet, if you get a $50 ticket, you feel differently about a $50 ticket than you do from a $50 fine that we issue out of the city hall. You have to go up to court, you have to deal with it. You know, there's some psychological issues along with it. And that's something that we will definitely be utilizing more in the future is that the ticket process.
Well, I don't think the permit fee should go up at all. I mean, it's people's land, they should be able to build what they want. It's just, we want people to follow the procedure, so I don't think we're looking to make money on the permit fee.
No.
$20 on the permit fee is fine.
Right, and
Just want people to do due process.
And there are a number of permits that we do in here where we don't even have a fee, and the main reason is that all we want to do is have a vehicle for communication, to make sure that people are doing it right, you know, and trying to be as helpful as we can. I mean, we do have to have the $20 because there's costs involved in us handling it and managing that. But by having and this is where in Grant's examples, if something were done without a permit, all right, they would come in, or we would contact them, we'd give them the non-compliance, and here's your ticket. When they come in to get the permit, because they're out of compliance every single day if they don't come in immediately to get that ticket, or if they wait a week, I mean, we could issue them 5 tickets until they come in and file for a permit. When they file for the permit, whatever you put in there, X times the permit fee, that's what we would charge at that point. So, Danny, to your comment, it could be 5 times, 10 times. I mean, if you wanted to put it at a certain level. We've had 3 times, and I just used the 3 because we kind of followed the building code, but I think we're mature enough now in our processes to kind of decide what that number should be. I mean, you guys can decide. If it's 5 times, then it's $100. You know, instead of 60, it's $100. Yeah, it's a bite. It's definitely a bite.
And I'm not saying I suggest that, I'm just asking if you could do that.
Yeah, you could. You could. It's totally up to you. To me, that's not the fine. That's not the fine like the ticket. That is, okay, that's what that permit fee now costs. Because, you know, we had to go chase you around, we had to write a letter, we had to issue the ticket. I mean, we still had some additional costs as well. So we could look at it that way. So, I wanted to make sure we pointed all of that out, because that is something that you have to decide as we put this resolution together, especially from the last meeting. And like I said, Grant and I have been working on this for the better part of 2 weeks to make sure that we're doing the right thing for you guys, for the community. And we want feedback, and we want, obviously want to pass the resolution tonight.
Any other questions or comments on that?
Mr. Carlson, you said we had a couple of people come in after we talked about it at the last council meeting. How is there a couple? Is there not anybody out there looking at this stuff?
No, they didn't come in because they didn't have permits. They didn't come in because they didn't violate. They came in because they had projects and they came in. We had little, I think they were making sure they had the permit.
Okay.
But they didn't, yeah, we're out there looking at it, but we aren't riding around the community though,
No,
you know what I'm saying?
But, and to echo both Scott's comments and Mayor Brew's and Mr. Anderson's, I think sometimes as a community, people, you look at the permit process and you think, well, it's draconian and it's getting involved in my life, and this is as much, the permit fee, I think, is appropriately set at a little bit of a lower number, so it's not punitive to get a permit fee. And it's designed so that not only just to make sure that, hey, you're in compliance with the height requirements, the zoning requirements, again, as we talk about a fence, but also other people's property rights are at issue, that it's not too close to a property line, that it's not too close to Mr. Anderson's neighbor or infringing upon his property line. So it's just as much about education, and I think as a community, especially in the UP, sometimes we forget about some of the things that are necessary just to double check on property lines, double check on site issues. In the zoning, downstate, some of the bigger communities, it's much more of an issue, and we're lucky enough to live up here where it's not quite as big of an issue, but it is, when it starts to impinge upon the neighbor's rights and other people's rights, that's where you try to nip it before it gets too far down the road and have the zoning administrator look at it and make sure it is in compliance so the permit can get approved and move forward.
And zoning can be very time consuming.
I do like the $20 permit fee. That's,
Yeah.
you know, I don't want to go any higher than that.
Yeah.
But I don't like the $60 fine.
You think it should be more?
Absolutely.
I agree.
So do I. I think it should be a little bit more.
I mean, we don't have to make it 3 times for whatever, just say, make it $100 or $150, you know, 200, whatever.
You
Doesn't have to be a multiplication type.
No, what's worse, a ticket or a fine?
Well, you can do both if you
Well,
You
want.
do both?
We have to be, and I'm gonna throw this back to Grant, because there's a case that we always fall back to called Bolt. And what it basically says is that when you have a fee, you can't, it has to be correlated with, there's a difference between a fee and a tax. And a fee has to be correlated back to cost, you know, so you have to be somewhat careful. So how we word it, is it a fine or a fee? And then the other thing is, can you give a ticket that has, gonna have a violation fee and have our own internal fee, fine? You know, that, I gotta throw that back.
Well, that's what
at
I'm
you
just
there.
trying to follow to make sure I understand what council's intention is, because if we issue a ticket, the ticket is set by the magistrate, by the court.
Yeah.
We don't set that number. We made a phone call a week and a half ago and said, what's the ticket amount under this circumstance? And she looked it up under the charts and said it's a $100 ticket. And that's not for me or us to decide what that ticket amount is. That's what's set up for the first offense for a violation of the general zoning code for the cities. Same as, again, Iron Mountain. I think Kingsford has it. I'm sure if Kingsford has the same thing or not.
How does that stay on your record?
It's a municipal violation, it's a civil infraction. I don't think it would go on your record per se, because it's not like a traffic ordinance violation, like a speeding ticket
Yeah.
or a misdemeanor offense. So I didn't ask the magistrate that, but I don't think so, and I've never seen it on anybody's lien report or record ever. So I'd have to say no, it wouldn't, Councilman Pop. I'm not sure.
Well, I would
don't-
think
I
that
don't
if we're
believe
only
it
gonna
would
get
be.
3% back from, you know, a ticket, I say we stay with the fine. So we can collect the money from it. But I'm not so much worried about the money, I'm just follow the rules. That's,
So what do you want to see, like 5 times the permit fee, or 7 times, 10 times?
well, if, can we do like what the ticket would be? The first offense would be 100, second offense, you can raise it? Can you do that? Mr. Carlson?
Like a first, Mr. Anderson violates it one time, it gets $100, violates it a second time,
I got an
$200.
expensive fence.
What, I guess, what are the, I mean, you're starting to get into writing kind of like statutory, you know, how many years are we talking?
Yeah.
Do we, is it 2 within 5 years, 2 within 7 years, 3 within 10 years? It's those unintended kind of opens the door, kind of Pandora's box. I wouldn't recommend we get into that because we're not gonna, so I know we keep records, but
No, I don't
to start
think we
going
should.
back, you know what I mean?
What's your thoughts, Mr. McGee?
Well, I just think it should be enough where it'll stop people from being sneaky. And I don't know if the figure should be 100 or 200. But make it enough so they won't do it.
Mr. Ojo, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I'm thinking probably at least 100, maybe 2. Somewhere between 5 and 10 times the permit fee.
And currently, as the zoning code indicates, it's 3 times the fee amount, which is $60. Correct, Mr. Anderson? That's what it said, did it not?
Yeah, and you know what, I still wouldn't throw out the idea of the municipal fine or the ticket, because we see this in the property maintenance code. We have used this in property maintenance. You know, when someone, grass, as an example, you know, the first time they get it, we don't issue a ticket. You know, we give them the 10 days or 7 days, and we just want compliance. And if you don't comply, we take care of it and you get charged, and you get 15%. If we see, you know, that we have properties that we're dealing with every year. Every year we having to send them a letter, or multiple times during the same year. That ticket comes out, because we want to impress upon them. We're not here just to be your lawn service. We're not here to, you know, to chase you around. Comply. And after the first or second time, we issue the ticket. I think that latitude in the zoning code would be the same thing. We know if we've dealt with somebody, we'll zip them a ticket. If we get to the second time, come on, you know, second time, third time, we're zipping you a ticket. I think that's a good process. You know, the first time, the reason I want to make sure you're aware, I mean, here's could be a common example. You know, my mom does something, and, you know, she didn't know. She told the contractor, hey, I want to get this done, and the contractor's okay, and they do it. Yeah, the contractor should know to get a permit, but I'm telling you that they don't always do it. So the ticket goes to my mom, or your mom, or whoever,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of harsh, you know, so $200, you know. What you could say is, well, then they need to go back and have the contractor pay it, you know. But, you know, those are the unintended consequences that we do understand. But we don't want to be selective, and we don't want a lot of latitude in that part of it, because, you know, like Grant said, the selective enforcement is very dangerous. I think the ticket part of it is the part where we can, you know, you've got the second offense plus. You know, it's just like I said, property maintenance. And that's worked well. I will admit, that has worked well. So. And, you know, nobody here, I just want to make it clear, nobody here wants to get in that situation. You know, zoning, we're trying to help. We're not trying to be punitive. We're not trying to be overarching. But we do have a responsibility to protect everybody around your properties as well. And that's why we have it. We're trying to get you know, we spent a lot of time going through the zoning code, looking at all of the different rules that we have. They're there to protect the people around you as well. You know, so we want you to comply.
Well, like I said, I'm not looking to make money off of that. Hopefully people do follow the rules, so maybe instead of just us keeping up, we just issue the ticket and let the court deal with it.
I personally like just the 3 times the permit fee. If you, like you said, Mr. Anderson, if you get into it where a ticket has to be issued after so many offenses or whatever it may be, then we have to enforce that better.
And we don't have that many times, you know. I will say that. So. So what's your pleasure?
I would say 5 times the permit fee.
That's what I was thinking.
So if they need to obtain a permit, they don't get one, and they have to come in to get a permit, the ticket would be, or the permit fee
would be $100.
$100.
Yeah, if they don't get
And
it.
if Mr. Anderson or whomever, Mr. Borga, issues a ticket, that's a whole separate issue. The court would deal with it.
Yeah.
Just want to make clear that
Correct.
the discussion, to make sure
Yeah.
I understand it as well, it would be, because right now, if you don't get a permit and you get cited for it, you come in, get your permit, it'd be $60. Court's, council's pleasure is to increase that to $100, and the court deals with the ticket.
Yeah.
What about
Yes.
the determination to remove the structure prior to obtaining the permit? That was discussed and passed last time.
We'll leave that up to the zoning. That's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking. Zoning Board of Appeals. What do you guys think?
I agree.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to modify that section to 5 times the permit fee?
That's what I understand.
Okay.
Do we need a motion on that?
Yep.
That's what I was thinking.
I would suggest the motion include rescission or, I guess, rescission of last week's
Do it.
motion that was made.
All right, so you want that rescinded?
Or what I thought would be the right terminology for it, but a motion to impose a zoning compliance permit fee of 5 times the cost, the original fee, which would be $100 if they do not obtain a permit prior to doing so. Remove the language from I think last time the council made the comment of the $500 fine. And remove the requirement that you tear down the structure prior to obtaining a permit to get into compliance.
I'll make a motion what Grant said.
Support.
Be right with you. Mr. Kramer?
No.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Ocha?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
And then we have 2008, Resolution 2008-11, or did you?
One
ask
other,
for-
We
one
gotta
other
pass.
question on the administrative fees would be more for Mary. That credit card fee of 1.5%, is that still sufficient or close to sufficient?
Yes, it is. Our fees are running about 2%, but we want to eventually get rid of that and go to the online. Now, the online systems that are out there have some fees associated with them, and what I'm going to bring to the council will be if we want to absorb all of them, let the user absorb all of them, or there's like a couple of them that I've talked to have like a sharing type. So we're probably going to still have some costs, but for now, I think that's fine.
All right, we need a motion on Resolution 2018-10, General Utility Service Rate Resolution.
I'll make a motion, we approve Resolution 2018-10.
Support.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Now we'll move on to Resolution 2018-11, Mr. Anderson.
As I mentioned, this is, pay rates for the non-union employees, and it's basically that these employees are not covered under bargaining agreements. We typically have followed the bargaining unit agreements from a increased standpoint, so it's for your pleasure. It also includes all our summer help, election workers, volunteer firemen.
Yeah, I believe we went through these in budget.
Yeah.
Is there any questions on that? If not, I need a motion.
No question, I'd just like to make a comment on that, where we've bumped up the rate for our volunteer firemen to $15 an hour. And anybody that thinks they're not worth that, come and talk to me.
Thank you, Luke.
I'll make a motion, we approve Resolution 2018-11.
Support.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Abstain from seasonal employment, but yes on the rest.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on to the approval of City Hall installation project.
As I mentioned in the budget hearing, there's a couple things that we had included in the budget, take care of at City Hall. And One is that we need to add insulation up in the attic. I've been working with, and looking up in that space, and I think that's a situation where we are under our valued. Some areas that I'm not sure what happened, but that we're missing insulation. I did provide you the RFP. We did advertise. Gave you some pictures of what we were looking at. And we did receive 2 quotes. One's from J&J Insulation from here in Vulcan for $7,400, $7,410. The other is from Forsland Building Supply out of Ironwood, Michigan, $10,725. So we're recommending award it to J&J to do that project.
Okay, do we have a motion on that? Or any questions first?
A comment on this. It's terrible, terrible work that company did. I know we have no recourse, but it always seems we take a hit on it. I'm sure they charged us for the R40 value insulation that they're supposed to put in there. And looking at these pictures, it's terrible.
If there's no other comments, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
That we award the installation project to J&J Installation for the price not to exceed $7,410.
Support.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Move on to approval of purchase of ABCB voting equipment. Trish?
We I threw you for a loop, didn't it? I threw you for a loop, didn't it?
Yeah, you did.
Actually, we got contacted from Dolly Cook, and we did get a voting machine, was it this past year, Trish? Under a grant?
We did get our first machine under a grant.
And they actually came back and said, I think you should get a second machine.
Township is getting one. There's a few municipalities and townships getting a second machine, and I have currently 2 machines. And it's for when it's a larger election, so I can have an absent counting board. But they won't give me 2 with the grant, I can only get 1. So, that's what this is about.
Do you feel we really need that, Trish?
I do. They said, Dolly called me and she said she couldn't believe I didn't put in for one because I have the highest number of voters per precinct.
Percentage-wise?
Percentage-wise, but what did she say, Ray? Do you remember?
Yeah, we're close to having to be split
To 2 precincts.
into 2 precincts. So we're real close, and I think they're always nervous. I mean, if you have that, we use the 2 machines, and if you have, like Trish said, if it's a big election, a presidential, we need that 3rd machine. If a machine goes down, then we're without the backup, you know, and voting day is a terrible day to have issues. The other thing that I remember, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe that if we did it now, along with the township, that there was a shipping expense that was actually a pretty high number.
They're coming, yeah, she had said they're freight, they're all coming over in this big freight.
Right, so then we wouldn't be charged for shipping.
Yeah.
Whereas if we got it at another time.
And the
we'd say-
township and I, clerk, they're getting one too. We thought about sharing one, but then we realized whenever she'd need it, I'd need it, so doesn't really.
Did
So-
you put this in the budget, Ray?
Well, actually, we're buying it for this year.
Oh, this one.
So there's enough money in the budget
Yes.
for that?
Yeah. Yep.
And we've ran into that before where we've had trouble on voting day.
Yeah. And that absent counting, when I have a separate counting board for my absent voter ballots, it makes it so much easier. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
I'll make a motion, we approve the purchase of an additional tabulator machine from Dominion Voting for a price not to exceed $5,295.
Support.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Move on to the approval of Sturgeon Falls Hydro Annual License Compliance Engineering Support.
This is an annual budgeted and approved project. We have Meet and Hunt handles our annual compliance engineering. This year, when we look at, I gave you all sorts of backup on not only the proposal, but what we're due this year to have to deal with on the license. You know, this is something that it ranges from anywhere from the low 20s, 22,000, up to like this year is going to be 31,300. It's not the same every year. Also, the engineer that I work with, Sean Pusen from Mead and Hunt, he does an excellent job of staying below the number, so that's a not to exceed number. You know, whatever we can do to offset the cost, he'll help us and encourages us. So we work through this during the year, but we don't want to anticipate something and then have a low number. So this particular year, it's $31,300. Again, we go through this every year at this time to approve the Meet and Hunt compliance. I've given you, again, out of our compliance manual, you know, we got a couple things this year that we have to address, so that happens every couple years.
Do I have any questions or comments?
I got a comment here. We have to stay on the friendly side of our friends at FERC, but I always got a chuckle at some of this stuff that they have in there, like we have to work with the DNR on, coordinate the eagle monitoring with the DNR, and this year it's only $500.
Yeah, we watch the nest.
We watch, is that who we watch the nest? Okay.
We protect the nest, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
All right. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that Mead and Hunt be approved to provide technical assistance to submit license compliance documents to FERC for a price not to exceed $31,300.
Support.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes. Move on to the approval request to vacate right-of-way in the plat of Norway Heights.
This is something that came in late last week, and I laid out the process for a request for variation. The first step is to bring the council, if you want to not move forward on the process, you just stop it right now, you say nope, and we're done. But if you're saying, okay, well, this is a reasonable request, then you follow through the process, and the first thing we do is, there's a $500 fee, application fee for variation, or for vacation. And one of the reasons is we do not sell property right away. We cannot sell right away. We can vacate right away, and when we vacate it, it goes to associated properties, owners. But we do have costs, a little more than just filing for a public hearing, because there's a whole detailed process that goes involved. So there's some of the property for sale requirements that we utilize, like surveying or some of the legal fees, putting deeds together, that we're going to ask the petitioner. But it needs to be a well thought out process, and that our costs are covered, and that you know, that's not the taxpayers that are funding this request. But with that being said, on this specific request, this is up on 16th Avenue. Mark Thaler, he requests and I've given you a map with a highlight area of right-of-way that, quite frankly, does make some sense. It has a unique jog to it. that if you square it off the right-of-way from 16th Avenue, you can see in that pink shaded area what he's talking about. If the council is, you're not approving the vacating tonight, what you're doing is you're just saying, you know, that makes, we're okay with going through the process, then what we would do is tell Mr. Thaler, fill out the application, $500 fee, and then we would put together paperwork for a public hearing.
Is
We
this
publish
just
it.
the spot he's looking at right here?
Yes, actually, he said he was willing to go beyond with Ken Rhodey, even though Ken he said he'd just go ahead and do the whole thing. So he's requesting, now Ken, the Rhodeys would have the piece that's out in front of their house.
I was just gonna ask that.
Yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't make much sense to just kind of stop at the property line. I mean, he could, but he said, let's just go ahead and go through the whole thing, because it's just an additional small pipe.
I guess my question was just,
Yeah.
why would he want that piece in front of the other house? But I see
No,
what
that-
you're saying.
Yeah, that would go to the Rhodeys. When you vacate, it goes to the attached property.
Okay.
I see no problem with letting them move forward on this.
I agree.
I agree too. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, staff be authorized to move forward with Mr. Thaler's request for vacating right-of-way.
Support.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Okay, now we'll need, before I do that. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the council, they may do so right now.
Do you want to go into closed session for that?
Well, how about I do council comments and everything, then we'll go into closed session, or no?
Yeah, I put it up in communications just so if you're all set and you guys have said, okay, well, we can vote on that.
Oh, you want us to vote on it?
Yeah. we need
Okay,
to
well,
move
then
on
we need
that.
to do that then. And I'll go back up to that.
If you want to discuss it, then we should go to closed session. It's pending litigation
Okay.
on the Marana case,
Okay. All right, so
tax tribunal case.
we're gonna go into closed session, discussing litigation. We'll come back out and we will have mayor and council comments and staff comments. And then we also be going back into executive session on city manager evaluation. All right, so we need a motion to go into, closed session.
I'll make a motion, we go into closed session to discuss those two items.
Just one.
Just one,
Just
and one, we can't do it both at the same time?
Well, you have to come out to vote on it.
Yeah, if we come out to
okay,
vote, we can.
okay.
do that.
Support.
There will be, there may be action taken after the closed session.
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Can we end that motion? Jeremy, did you make it? Yeah. Lee? Scott, did you support that?
I made the motion.
Who supported it? Jeremy. Who supported that one in the closed session? I'm a little anal about that. I write everything down all the time, just in case Tricia. All right, I need a motion to go back into open session.
I'll make a motion, we go back into open session.
Support.
Who support?
Brett. Lee made the motion and seconded by
Mr.
Brett.
Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes,
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
and then we will move up to 14, approval of tax tribunal case.
Okay, you have in your confidential memo the details that are associated with the case and the recommendation for settlement on the Marana tax tribunal case. There's our attorney, Mr. Jack Van Koevering, has recommended a settlement. It's something that the Maranas have agreed to in principle, and the council has to approve. So we're looking for, I guess we're looking for a motion for that. Yeah.
Do I have a motion?
Well, it doesn't seem like anybody's happy about it.
Make a motion to have.
I'll make a motion that the city accept the following settlement. We have to put the figures in there?
Yeah, we'll put the figures in.
Make a motion that we, city accept the following settlement, the reduction of the 2017 true cash value from 218 to 185. Our proposed settlement number, a reduction of the 2018 true cash value to 180,000. Dr. Morano's settlement number, Dr. Morano's written agreement that he will not appeal the values in 2019.
Support.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to mayor and council comments. Scott, do you have any
I have
comments?
nothing tonight.
Okay. Lee?
Just one little comment, actually a question, Ray, for you. This FERC Form 80, I don't quite understand what they were saying in our confidential, not confidential stuff, but they're going to eliminate it. I read it and I didn't really understand where they were going.
Yeah, it's actually, I made a phone call to find out exactly how or if that affects us, and actually, it doesn't really affect us. It's something that administratively they've been doing, and affects the engineers a little bit, I suppose, you know, so with me on, it'll help them out.
Well, that's all I was concerned, that
Yeah.
it really would affect us. That's all I have.
Okay.
Jeremy?
Nothing.
The only comment I have is, I like to thank the staff for working on the budget. I know some of us went in and had some questions, and they have worked really good with us, so I really appreciate all the hard work that was done on that. Mr. Anderson?
I have nothing at this point.
Mr. Carlson?
None, thank you.
Trish? All right, if there's nothing else, we have to make a motion to go back into closed session for city manager evaluation.
Make a motion, we go back into closed session for city manager evaluation.
Support.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes. We will not be voting on anything after this.